Would it surprise you if I told you that your dog food is actually produced with more safety guidelines, quality parameters, and oversight than your weed? I'm Dr. Tess, a microbiologist, product safety and compliance expert in the cannabis industry. It's important to note that this video is not meant to undermine the hard work that cannabis cultivators put in to produce high quality product, or to undermine how challenging this industry can be. The purpose of this video is to show the differences between manufacturing requirements, address the gaps to consumers and to cultivators, so that we can really start a conversation about how we take this natural product to the next level. So when we're talking about the safety and quality of products comparing dog food and cannabis, dog food is overseen by the FDA Food Safety Modernization Act, or FSMA, and that gives the FDA authority after tons of recalls in the early 2000s. Now, cannabis has these piecemeal state regulations, and each state doesn't really have a lot of authority on product safety. Dog food has to undergo this thing called HACCP, or hazard analysis, which identifies those physical, biological, and chemical hazards that may be present in your unique process. So this is a list that is tailored to you, that you have to make sure you're protecting consumers. But that's not really required in cannabis except for some pesticide listing, and there is a huge gray area in post-harvest spaces, and so we'll talk about that later. Next on the list is our GMP Good Manufacturing Practices certification. It's required in dog food. You have to have all your SOPs together. Everything is documented with batch records. You know that what you're doing is being done clean and the people are trained on how to do it. In cannabis, there's kind of mixed regulations on good agricultural practices and good manufacturing practices, but they're typically not required. For dog food, you're required to keep track of all your implementation procedures. How are you going to say what you are doing is meeting GMP and meeting your HACCP needs? What kind of documentation are you going to have? This is logging the time, temperature, humidity, water activity of the product, of the environment, and making sure that you're within spec so that you can make corrections and corrective actions if you need to. And how are you really validating and verifying you're hitting your HACCP targets? At the cannabis side here, we'll find that really the only product monitoring that is pretty consistently enforced across all states is weight tracking. So tracking the weight at harvest, tracking the number of plants, tracking the grams of oil that you have on hand. And that's all through metric and BioTrack. And then there's endpoint testing, which is really focusing on those C of A's. And so those C of A's are those endpoint tests that are telling you only one verification step, at least in that sample, that you do not have certain contaminants like pesticides or biological materials, but it is not a comprehensive understanding of your entire processes. So there are some caveats to the C of A's as well. With batches, like selling flower in bulk, that flower in bulk will be tested, but then it will be sent out and divvied up, and it's not really tested in that final product form that the consumer is going to get. Now, some states do require that you only submit final products. There's also differences in who sends the samples. Is it the manufacturer, or does the lab come and pick up the samples? So there's a lot of differences in how those C of A's are determined in each step. Again, it's just a verification step. And then finally, dog food, part of the ready-to-eat nature of dog food requires environmental monitoring. You don't want something in your environment to contaminate that product before it gets into final packaging. And that requires that you confirm surfaces, equipment, drains, everything basically touching and near your final product needs to be sanitized, monitored with swabs, ATP meters, things like that, in order to confirm that you are producing this in a clean environment. And then finally, adverse reaction database, there's usually an FDA national database. However, in legal cannabis, it is a little spotty again, depending on the state. However, both products do require recall plans, and so that is very similar. But overall, when you look at cannabis manufacturing, there's really no federal oversight. No one's coming in and inspecting these facilities, at least not for safety, other than perhaps pesticides. So a lot of times when inspectors come in, they're looking for fire extinguishers, or they are making sure that everybody's on camera, but they're not really inspecting that the process is being done in a clean way and that you are minimizing all of your different hazards. There's really no hazard analysis or HACCP or GMP that's required for cannabis manufacturing, and very limited documentation, not only how everything is done, but documenting those products along the entire process to ensure that you are addressing all of those potential risks. So overall, dog food definitely has more strict safety, quality, and oversight than our cannabis.